As the 2023 general elections draw near, a number of states are also gearing up to elect their next governors. In 2022, the people of Ekiti State will be going to the polls to select their next governor. Other states who will select new governors are Akwa Ibom, Cross River, Ebonyi, Enugu, Kaduna State, Kano, Katsina, Rivers, and Taraba states. Now, in the just recently concluded Anambra State election, the preferred candidate of Governor Willie Obiano not only won the APGA ticket, but also went on to win the election. Is it now safe to say that the governors of these states, which would be going to the polls, would also want to exercise power over who the next leader would be? Well, joining us to discuss this and answer the question is Achike Chude and Biodushomi, both political analysts. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. I'm going to start with you, Shomi. It's interesting that Ekiti State is where everybody's looking at, and I think you and I had a conversation recently about, the politics around, the next elections. But we also see something very interesting happening in Ekiti. Not just the men throwing their hats into the ring, but we're seeing a lot more women who are also putting their best foot forward to run for governorship. In Ekiti State, we have Governor Fayemi, who is of the APC. And then we know that in Ekiti, we have the APC and the PDP fighting tooth and nail to make sure that they emerge as, the party for 2022. But let's start by looking at the electoral process. We see that sometimes the governors always want the person they think can take over from them and do a better job. Sometimes maybe for the wrong reasons, sometimes for the right reasons, but the governors always want to exercise that power. But we also see sometimes the hand of Esau in states where you have godfathers who decide, who the next person would be. But in Ekiti State, we have seen Fayemi hold a national appointment before he came back to become governor. With all the people who have put their foot forward to run for governorship, do you think it's going to be an easy task to pick somebody to succeed him?
Yes. When you look at Ekiti, Ekiti is one single ethnic state. You don't have two different ethnics in Ekiti. They are all Ekiti people, and that's all. And therefore, we are likely going to have what I would call a robust challenge, without devoid of ethnic politics, in the selection of who will be the next gubernatorial candidate for the state. Now, when you go into the issues, there are three major issues why people, existing governors, want to midwife the new governor. And the first one is the issue of continuity of programs in office. We live in a country where there are a lot of abandoned projects. So many governors genuinely, think that they should be in a position to ensure that their vision of development should continue when they are out of office. That is one part. The second fact also is you may have governors who are troubled by the way they've governed the state, or maybe due to malfeasance or face severe allegations, also interested in showing that they can get one of their cronies noted. So those are the three major factors. Now back to Ekiti. That is one major issue for Ekiti people. The second issue is also, there's also the issue of the stomach infrastructure, which is quite very important. Because when you look at Ekiti State, it's quite a very, very poor state with virtually no industries, apart from one big industry, which I know of. I don't know of any other industry. Except you want to talk of the spring water, which is, when you talk about industries, you don't really refer to those, So it's a civil society. It is also very peculiar in the sense that it is the only state in Nigeria where majority of the people voting are actually 45 upward. Those are the majority. Unlike in many states where you have the minority of the voters being the young people. The simple reason is because you don't have the industries, there are no jobs or employment apart from civil service. So what you then have is all the youths graduating tend to migrate to other cities in search of greener pastures. So consequently, Ekiti voters tend to be civil servants, teachers, and older people. So that is the uniqueness of Ekiti State itself. So on succeeding itself, if you look at the pattern, Fayose was in power, he was kicked out of power due to alleged corruption, only to be replaced, by the election of Governor Kalbi Fayemi. Fayemi was in power, he was considered as not being too distant, from the grassroots. Again, he was kicked out. We had a short brief of Kuni Shegoni in power. Fayemi came back, was Minister of Mines and Power, then he came back. Minister of Mines, then he came back to become the governor. So you have Segun Oni now angling to say that, look, there's a tradition, there's a principle of Ekiti people wanting people to complete their term. In the case of Oni, he never completed any term because he was kicked out by the courts. So in this situation, he tends to enjoy a lot of sympathy. I know that he's not in the same APC with the family. Fayemi, he actually led to go to PDP to slug it out with the former deputy governor, Biomo Olujimi, for the ticket of the party. But what be that as it may, my guess feeling is that we're likely going to see Segun Oni emerging for PDP. Because there are also other
even in the midst
factors,
of all the women that the PDP, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 8 women have, thrown their hat into the ring, meaning that we have more women than usual running for the post of a governor. So amidst all of these women, you're telling me that...
parts of Yoruba, it's not just about the state. We have the same situation in other parts of the country. But you have a situation where the recurring decimal PDP, so it has some measure of support across the 2 political parties, unlike the female candidate. Note that he's not a pushover. He's quite very popular within the state. He's from Ifaki. So he's quite very, very popular from a substantial voting population area. So when you look at the situation, it is likely, in my view, not likely going to go for a female district, but they might choose a female as a deputy governor, but they are still likely going to go for a male.
Well, that remains to be seen. But let me quickly go to Achike. Achike, who picks the preferred candidate? Because this has been a conversation that we've had over and over again. It's one thing to say you want a good candidate to be flying the flag of your party, but then who does the picking? Because that we see this issue of governors always wanting a predecessor to be that person that's either anointed or picked up, or picked by a godfather of sorts, depending on the state. But most times we see governors bringing their own cronies, just like Mr. Showomi has said. But where do we come in here to make sure that whoever comes or whoever the party throws up at the end of the day can carry on the legacies of the governor that just left? I'll give you an instance. For example, you have a Cross River State which has had a Donald Duke, amazing governor. And you also had the next person who was a former senator. He was a former minister for power. He was a former minister for education, then became governor. But then you now have a Ben Ayade who's taken the state back 10 years. This all obviously calls for concern. And it's not just that. He's now moved to the opposition. How does this play into picking a predecessor? Because that seems to be, it's going to be a war between the APC and the PDP come 2023.
Well, I think our democratic culture or our democracy has not gotten to a level where you can say that at every level of selection or election of political leaders, that is from government election, not to talk of even the higher offices, state offices or federal level, is such that it is only people that have very serious connections with the powers that be within the political parties, the structure of those political parties, that can actually be in a position to choose the person they want. And so once such people are picked, the next thing is to present them to the members of the party and to the public for election. And the people actually really have no choice, because we have not gotten to a level where party ideology or the ideology drives the voters to the polling units drives them into making or casting their ballots on the basis of the things that they believe. So people vote for candidates just because the candidates represent political parties and they represent other interests, not because they represent any strong ideological compass. And so that is the issue. And then, because the reality is that most of these political parties actually belong, maybe I'm exaggerating, of course, if I use the word, but to a very large extent, at least on the basis of the influence that certain people have within these political parties, we could say to a very large extent that certain people have larger than life attitude, image within those political parties. They determine what happens in the political parties. We find this conversation, Mary Ann, with you on this, particular program. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the people are actually disempowered. If you all right, through the voting, the selection process of candidates. So what you see ultimately at the end of the day is that people must go out to vote candidates, and in most cases they might not know much about these candidates.
Isn't that a choice? Because I think that's what it boils down to. That becomes a choice between a bigger devil and a lesser devil, like what happened to us in 2015. I'm asking this question because in Anambra it seemed that maybe except one person, the candidates that were presented seemed better, and there were options, there were good options, but then of course the best man, in quote, won. So why can't we have that in every other state? Why can't we have that replicated?
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. In spite of the deficits that we have within our democratic process, the reality, if you look at the kind of candidates that emerge nowadays, you will find out that there's an improvement, actually, at least at the level, and I'm not talking about the moral imperatives of each of these people. I'm not talking about their ethical orientation, at least in terms of the presentation of this of candidates, in terms of the level of education that some of them have. You find out that there is actually an improvement, in the qualification of some of these people for public office. So we saw that in Anambra State, and we saw the debates, the governorship debates. We saw how articulate most of the people that participated were. So at that level, yes, we're beginning to have an upgrade in terms of the qualification of these people for public office. But at the moral level, and that is actually where the bane of our politics is, because the people who ultimately emerge as political leaders are people who do not even act in conformity with the hopes and aspirations of the people who get there for the purpose of personal aggrandizement. And so you see the corruption that is going on. You see the perversion of public office, and the disobedience or the respect even for the rule of law, even in their states, and also at the federal level. But in spite of that, perhaps people will say, maybe the excuse we can provide is the fact that we have about 60 years of independence, and out of the 50 years, we have perhaps about 30-something years of democracy or democratic practice, while some other countries that we're imitating have had about 200, 250 years. Perhaps to some extent, we can provide some excuses for us that it is still a process in the works, and that we might eventually get there.
Does that excuse hold water? Because do we really necessarily have to wait 200 years to have a strong democracy? I mean, if we're copying, can't we copy well? Just saying.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm saying I do not necessarily think that excuse holds water. If we're having to wait, like the US, to attain 200 years of democracy, then it means that we're not necessarily copying well. Do we have to wait till then?
You see, we already have a template. That's why that argument might not hold for too long. Because for some of the countries that we're talking about, there was a process. Society is evolutionary. And so there was a process that lasted hundreds of years before they got to where they are. You understand? Of course, we all know where that process was abridged as a result of colonialism and the rest. And so they gave us a template that we are operating. We have not, as a result of our evolution as a country, we have not gotten to where we should get to, and at the time that we should get there. this has already been given to us. So we have a template that we're already working with. So if we consider that, from that perspective, we can say that there is no way we can be talking about waiting for another 200 or 250 years. Okay. We have everything that it takes. We have the advantage of education and the fact that we have so many other tools in the modern world that we use to at least have an idea of where to get to and all of that. But the issue, again, like I keep on saying, is the moral imperative. We seem to be lacking it, over the years. And that's why we are where we are today.
Okay, let me come back to you, Biadu. Let's talk about the issue of governors now making the Senate, a retirement home of sorts, for the want of a better, way to explain it. We've seen that happen over the years now. We've seen governors retire from governorship and become senators. And I'm trying to understand, is there a written rule somewhere? Who came up with the idea that governors can just, when they end their tenure, just go to the Senate? Because we see a lot of governors angling for that. Is it something that somebody came up with, or it was just a convenient way to run away from something?
Well, I think this is a product of our first experience when President Obasanjo was in power, when the EFCC was set up, and so many of the governors were concerned, about what the future holds in store for them. When Mbadu was in charge of this, of course, we had all the arguments. Oh, it's one-sided, it's not one-sided, it's a partisan investigation of the other. So there were allegations. But the fact of the matter is, many of the then governors were so petrified about life after being governors for 8 years and decided that, look, it might be more convenient to go to Senate where you can still hold some measure of influence. And we've seen those influence being deployed at different points in time to leverage on alleged crimes committed or the way they are handled, treated, or granted bail by the state. So we've seen all this in action because at the end of the day, if they're in Senate, they have oversight functions over, also power to make laws over those agencies that would investigate or prosecute them. So I think that is the major factor in why many of the governors are going to go to
So you're saying that the governors are afraid or they're evading investigation as to corruption or monies that are missing in the coffers. You're saying that this is the best way to run away from, the EFCC.
No. I'm saying that it is, for them, the way they build it is, and they're still doing it, is when you are in the Senate, you enjoy a measure of protection, being a senator of the Federal Republic. And therefore, you are in a position to carry out oversight function, to leverage on your membership of the Senate, on those agencies who, in any case, should be having oversight functions over, who are supposed to prosecute you. That is just one angle to it. There's the other angle, which is the angle of godfatherism. Many of them think when the new government is in there, they're likely not going to dance to their whims and caprices. And therefore, going into the Senate affords them the opportunity to hold on to a top of the constituency, in the state and still make themselves politically relevant, within that state. And they're in a position to cause trouble for the government. We have seen that quite copious examples of where you have senators, not even, not parleying with the government. And they're so powerful that the governors at times are worried about whether they'll be able to get a second time ticket or not. So these are the major factors which you can say are responsible for governors wanting, to go to the Senate as a political base, after leaving office as the government. It's not just about the fact that they want to have a level, but they still want to be politically relevant. You can look at some of those former governors who never went to Senate, particularly in the Southwest. Many of them today are no longer relevant in the politics of their different states. So I think these are the issues which are motivating the governors wanting to go to the Senate.
Okay, back to you, Achike. You obviously work with civil societies, and I always wonder what the conversations should be in terms of the fact that when the average Nigerian is listening to these kinds of conversations, they hear and understand what the inner workings of political parties are. What's stopping the average Nigerian from joining political parties and being part of these decisions that are made at whatever level, no matter how low the levels are? Number two, we're also seeing that states who were predominantly, let's say, PDP, and have now had their governors cross over to the opposition are having a lot of infighting as we speak. The likes of we have the Cross River State government, we have Zamfara State. We also still know that the deputy governor of Zamfara is still with the PDP. We also have Governor Mahi of Ebonyi, who also, cross-capited. And we're seeing a lot of infighting within these parties. What's 2023 going to look like already? Party conventions are still yet to be convened for some people, for some political parties. We know that congresses they've had parallel congresses in certain states because of, this infighting. For Cross River State, it was a big drama where the state PDP secretariat was converted overnight to an APC secretariat. So we have issues like that. What does 2023 look like for those states, especially the three states that I have mentioned?
Yeah, well, obviously, we all know that what we are just seeing now is the tip of the iceberg. The political elites in the country, unfortunately, is not a very responsible elite. They are not motivated by the desire to serve the public. It is all about personal aggrandizement to a very large extent. So what we see in terms of, provincial crisis. And like I said, these are political parties that are not governed by any strong ideological compass. So, and when you have that kind of a situation, anything goes, anything can be justified. And so governance is done on the basis of the whims and caprices of a particular governor, not even on the basis of the party philosophy, because you don't even have any serious enduring party philosophy, because that should be what should be motivating most of these governors. And if we look at what has happened in the country, especially in the Second Republic, we had a situation where political parties were exceedingly very strong, and where the state chairman, either the state chairman of the parties or the national chairman of the parties, were very, very strong. That today, you talk about a governor being the leader of the party in the state or the president being the leader of the party at the national level. But during the Second Republic, where we had the Adesai Akinloyes and the rest, you found out that, some of the governors and the president, Shehu Shagari, were beholden on the chairman, on the party chairman, because they were powerful. They determined the direction. That kind of situation where you do not allow polarity, or cross-fertilization of ideas between the members of the party, where it must be one person that would have a say. The tendency is for, over time, to sow seeds of rebellion. And this is what you're now seeing. That's what is responsible for some of the disparities. So for 2023, it is not, unless they can get their acts together. Of course, we have seen the bickering. We have seen, especially at the level of the APC as a political party, we have seen even their inability to even have a proper Congress. And we saw what happened in Lagos State, and not just the APC, even the PDP too. So that does not portend well for 2023, simply because the people who should be driving the politics of 2023 are themselves locked in all kinds of crises. Okay. And if they don't resolve this crisis, we are going to see some of these things play out before 2023.
Well, I'm wondering why the average Nigerian cannot be part of the political process, and we keep calling it a dirty game. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Be able to show me.
In this instance, there is no law presently in Nigeria that allows any of the law enforcement agencies or any other agency for that matter to monitor the WhatsApp conversations of Nigerians. And it's basically just to eavesdrop on phone calls and SMSs and other things that would go on private phones of private individuals, which is why we say it's unlawful. Okay. And if at all there was to be any law, that law still has to conform to the rights granted under the Constitution. And of course, the Constitution being the supreme law of the land. If any law conflicts with the Constitution, that is what the law says.
Now, the bandits that came and attacked those people in the market in Sokoto, I understood that there are more than 200 bandits. So what manner of policing system are we using in this country in order to create a state of security? What are we really protecting lives and property, which I know is the primary responsibility of government?
I want to ask, are there really manipulations in the PDP? Is there the hand of Esau and the voice of Jacob at play in the People's Democratic Party? Being that there are so many strongmen and of course different interests and many followers. Could that also be the reason why you said that this has never happened before in terms of when a tenure should expire and when the convention should happen? This is the first of its kind. Is this not in any way laying some, or rather giving credence to what your ousted chairman is making reference to?
Okay, the best way to answer it is that what we are playing in politics, what we are doing in PDP is pure politics. You agree with me that there are interests, personal interests and group interests, either present or in the future, that is towards 2023. Mm-hmm. And these interests are playing out. Nobody is neutral. Everybody has one interest or the other in the candidate or in what goes on. Mm-hmm. So what we are doing is not manipulation, it's pure politics.
What even became more surprising to some of us was the faulty attempt by the Nigerian security services and the government in general to cover up the massacre. Initially, there were attempts to deny that people were even shot in the first place. There was an initial denial. Then later it was accepted that yes, people were shot, but no one was killed. But later on, we found out that people were actually killed.
The dishonorable Minister of Misinformation, Lai Mohammed, the Honorable Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, I think his words are suspect. I think we need to pay attention to it. But we, the people, we know something has changed. The media or the information or the narrative can be passed out that says nothing has changed, No, something has changed. People are speaking. Nigerians around the globe are speaking. The international community is listening. The way you come to the UK, you come to America before and just walk on the street, Nigerians will stop you on the streets of London and question you. As a Nigerian minister, it's not the same thing anymore. So something has changed. The one thing about change is a process, and process takes time.
Well, one of the problems we have in this country, there is a lot of wastage is still inside our numbers. We don't have that much money. The little we have us all sorts of wastage. So let's go zero budgeting on those budgetary items. You really are from scratch and arrive at something that makes sense, rather than just put a percentage on what you spend the last.
To put forth to protect diverse cultures and practices from disappearing because of lack of use, curricular exclusion, or devaluation by a broader society. Now, in order to help preserve the seemingly disappearing cultures, the United States mission to Nigeria of the U.S. State Department has issued a notice of funding opportunity for small grants competition of the United States Ambassadors Fund for Cultural Preservation, AFCP. The AFCP supports the preservation of cultural sites, cultural objects, and forms of traditional cultural expression in more than 100 countries around the world, including Nigeria. Well, joining us to discuss this is Stephen Ibeli. He's the Public Affairs Officer, U.S. Consulate, Lagos. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you so much. It's really, really great to be here. And as they say in Nigeria, how you day?
How far now?
How far now? You day Kempe?
Of course I am. Okay. So it's interesting to hear about the Ambassadors Fund. When I saw some of the pictures online, I was very interested. Give us a brief background into the Ambassadors Fund and why the U.S. government is backing this.
No, that's a great question, Marianne. And so this really started in 2003. Congress passed this law where we fund cultural preservation around the world. And so we funded projects in over 137 countries. The program started in Nigeria in 2011, and since then we've done about 10 projects for over $1 million. And really the intent of the law and the intent of Congress was really to show respect and appreciation for the cultures around the world, for the countries that we work in, for the countries that we really operate in and really live every day. As diplomats, we don't just visit countries, we live in the countries, we breathe the countries, we eat the food in the countries. And so it's a great way to show that kind of respect. And it's a really wonderful program.
It's interesting. As we know, the U.S. is a strong supporter of efforts to preserve these cultures, just as you've said. And I read that you have so far preserved projects in several states across the Federation for the past 4 years.
Organization out of California, actually started by an Iraqi immigrant who cared about his country's heritage and wanted to pay that forward to other countries. And so they are working in the Sacred Grove in one of the shrines there that was unfortunately damaged. But what they're doing is really using technology. So it's like technological archaeology. And they're mapping the shrine, a 3D map. And so they will know from this 3D map then how they can reconstruct it. Because if you don't really have a roadmap, if you don't know, if you don't have a map in front of you, how do you know where you're going? And so this is the intent of this project.
Are they working with people who are like, let's say, because where I come from, you have someone who preserves shrines. So he's like a chief in charge of the shrine. And they seem to know more about the shrines and even the architecture of it. So are they working in collaboration with people like that? Yeah, no, absolutely. And it really, I think the success of this program is the partnerships that we make. And so we have a partnership with the National Commission of Museum and Monuments. We have partnerships even with the King there in Oshobo, Sacred Grove, and all of the organizations. There's also the Alursa Trust as well. There's a trust there that we work with, Aduni Alursa Trust, AOT, and with all of those partners who are interested in really preserving the Sacred Grove, I think we've really had a wonderful project. And that's just one example of all the projects that we've done here. The average person who's watching obviously wants to say, well, I have a beautiful place in, my area where it needs preservation. But you spoke about the competitive part of it, yes. and I want to know how that works because, of course, whoever's watching now is more interested. Why should people compete? Well, the applications are open until December 5th, and so we really welcome any of those projects to preserve. It's all on our website, which is ng.usembassy.gov. There's all the rules there, what sort of we fund, what we don't fund. For example, we don't build really buildings. We're more interested in the preservation of cultures. We've even done preservation of oral cultures. That was the Ifa oral heritage in Oyo State. That was one of our past projects. And so it's a worldwide competition, but Nigeria has done very well because Nigeria has such a rich heritage. It has such a rich history. We have another project, a really large one, in Epe. That's my culture. Preserving the Ajebu Kingdom. And there was a series of... Oh, that's Ekpe? Okay. Ekpe, exactly. And preserving sort of, the canals that are around and really defining where they are as well. And we're going to be doing that with LiDAR technology from the air. Oh, wow. Very similar to what they're doing in Oshobo on the ground, using this kind of, again, this technological archaeology. I mean, I think we think, we're digging in the ground and we're dusting off fossils with our brushes, but it's really technical with archaeology these days. Interesting. One of the things that I find very disturbing about preserving cultures and traditions is the fact that we're basically justicing it because we feel that we're more civilized now, and so we tend to put them, at the back. I've noticed that I've visited some places where the museums, the monuments are no longer really taken care of. These sites, I think 2 years ago I was visiting the old governor of the old colonial governor's home. It was literally dead. The building was almost falling down. And so I'm asking, when these monies are being given, when the funding takes place, is there some form of education for people to continue to maintain those sites? Because it's not enough to make it look good and refurbish it if there be any form of refurbishing, but then after a while it's abandoned again? Is there a follow-through? Are there people who make sure that that doesn't happen?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Marianne. And part of a lot of the grants is training. In Ashobo, for example, they're training a new generation about how to take care of these shrines, how the construction methods, how they actually do it. And so there's always a component, and there's always a local component. With our Ajebo Kingdom grant, we're working with 3 archaeologists from Ibadan and also from Ife. So that is really the strength of this program, are these partnerships that we form, because it's not just an American NGO, it's not just the consulate, it really is a community. It really does take a village in some of these cases, and that is how you propagate these into the future. Because if you really want to know, where you're going as a culture, you need to also know where you have been, and to be able to really hold on to that cultural heritage, to really savor it, to relish it, and to bring it out. And that's really what we try to do with this fund.
You mentioned the sites where your sites where people need to go to get the rules and the regulations. Are there age limits? Are they open to non-governmental organizations or governments or government agencies?
Yeah, they're mostly open to non-government agencies and government agencies, cultural institutions, museums. You see all kinds of different organizations apply. We always like to see the partnership, so we like to see one organization maybe working with another organization as well. The minimum is $10,000 and the maximum is $500,000. So that's sort of the floor and the ceiling, 10,000 to 500,000. And the website really spells it out exactly, what you need. You first kind of do a concept paper, and if that's accepted, then we ask for sort of a more detailed budget. So again, it's ng.usembassy.gov. Apply until December 5th.
Okay. Let's quickly talk about the places that you visited,
Sure.
aside from Oshobo. I saw some monoliths that look like some from my place, and you did mention
Yes.
off camera. So tell us some of the places you've been
Yeah,
to.
that's the Ecom rock carvings, and they're from Cross River State and also Jigawa State. And again, that shows you the breadth of this fund, that we work north to south, and it really, again, depends on sort of the proposals. But unfortunately, COVID disrupted that, but we're just getting back on track, because the plan is that we're going to actually exhibit those rock carvings in Calabar at the National Museum, which is a wonderfully beautiful oasis of calmness and beauty.
Have you been there lately?
I was there a few months ago, yes. And it's
But it's closed down.
Well, it's in an old colonial building, and we're doing some refurbishment there as well with the library.
Okay.
So it does operate. But they have a beautiful exhibition space, so we're going to do it there. And then we're also going to do it at the National Museum in Lagos.
Oh, great. So you work with the AFCT, sorry, I beg your pardon, the NCTDA, that's the tourism guys. Do you work with the National Museums and Monuments?
It's mostly the National Commission for Museum and Monuments.
And Monuments.
That's our partners. And really that's the entity that's also responsible for for the upkeep of these museums. And as a matter of fact, we're really getting close also to a cultural treaty with the government of Nigeria, and that will really set a framework for further cooperation. For example, the return of the Benin bronzes that are located in some museums in the United States. So we're really looking forward to making progress and signing that at a future date as well.
Well, one more time, can we get that website before we go?
Sure. ng.usembassy.gov.
Okay. You've been here for some time. Where have you visited and what meals have you tried?
Well, I've been to most of the states in the South. The consulate of Lagos is really responsible for the states in the South. So Oyo, Ondo, been to lots of cities as well, Port Harcourt, Oyo.
Did you try the bole and the fish in Port Harcourt?
I had the fisherman soup in Calabar, delicious, very, very good. And so, yeah, I mean, we try all the foods everywhere we go. I think my favorite is probably, catfish pepper soup, like that as well. Ofada was, good, a little hot for me, very spicy, that was a challenge. But I tried, and succeeded, I think, to some degree.
Have you tried amala?
Yes, I have, of course. Yeah, no, that's a signature. I mean, that's, bring it. So yeah, no, but it's really wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful meeting the people. We have wonderful partners, really wonderful partners who are passionate about all of the different things we do, whether it's women in STEM, whether it's the cultural, preservation, or whether it's working with young people or civic activism. We have over 8,000 alumni in this country from our program exchanges, and they are so active, so optimistic, and so energetic, and we just love working with them.
It's beautiful, and I want to appreciate you. We're hoping that you keep us up to date with the more of these activities that you're doing across the country, because this is how we preserve our culture and continue to bring them to light.
Absolutely.
Stephen Ibeli is, of course, of the U.S. Consulate here in Lagos. We want to thank you for being part of the conversation.
Thank you so very much, Marianne.
Thank you for the great work. Well, thank you all for staying with us. We'll take a short break now to hear what Nigerians believe as regards of governors having a hand in the selection of their successors. We'll return, and I'll give you my take.
Hello and welcome. It's Nimasa This Week, the voice of maritime. Nimasa This Week is brought to you by the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency. Statutorily mandated to ensure that there is regulation and promotion of matters affecting our waters. NIMASA bears responsibility for search and rescue, shipping development, and ship registration.
NIMASA This Week, the voice of maritime, showing on this channel.
Now we don't need to. We need to fight for ourselves. Let the masses fight for themselves. They should not say godfatherism for anything. They don't have any reason to say you have this. You are person that will enter if you live there.
No, I don't think so. I don't just think so.
Because the government is for the people and for the people by the people. So I think the people have to make their choices, not for them being there.
Well, thank you all for being part of the conversation. Don't forget, be part of the political process. Do not just get your voter's card, but join a political party today, whichever one you choose, wherever you want to join, whatever ideology you think the party holds, it would be good for you because you can be part of the decision making in your community, in your state, and of course in the country. I am Marianne Okon, thanking you for joining us. Have a good evening.
Nigeria, by extension, Africa, is faced with a lot of challenges. The growing youth population with little engagement, that is a ticking time bomb. We are a blessed people with diverse culture and highly cerebral minds who have a lot to say. And yes, we are talking. It is important we drive the right conversation that informs, inspires, influences thoughts and action. If we say there's beauty in our diversity, then let us embrace our diverse culture. We must continue to courageously be the voice of transformation as we are the hope for the future. Yesterday's conversations shape today. What are you saying to shape your tomorrow? We know you have a lot to say, and we are here to hear you.
It is engagement we need to have.
Those who suffer miscarriages are never taken into account.
Members of the National Assembly are also influence peddlers.
You are sitting on Nigerians' money.
From the barbing, I pay my rent. On the barbing, I send my children to school.
A consultative engagement.
No any tangible notification before they ban us.
It's one thing for people to be at your back and the heat of the moment, and another thing for them to still be with you when push comes to shove.
I will do everything to take Lagos out of the national grid.
Hey, what's up, guys? You're welcome to another edition of Plus Event, and I remain your host, Ifeoluwa Oshuke.
Your absence isn't an excuse anymore, as Plus Events is all you need, as we bring you the glitz, the glamour, and loads of fun.
Oh, definitely.